All right, we are now live. Today we'll be talking about Behind His Silence Stories Men Don't Tell, featuring Antonio Dawson and myself, Chantal Monroe. I am the CEO and founder of CKM Healing Consultancy, where we believe that with a little care we can help to kindle the mind of persons for healing. And I'm so excited to have you guys join with us, and I'm about to head over to add my guest so we can just get into this conversation. Yeah, all right. Hi, Rochelle. Hey, how are you doing? How are you doing there? That's good. Hey, Antonio. Thank you so much.
Hey, can you hear
Uh,
me?
yeah, I can hear you and see you clearly. Initially, it said we couldn't join, but it worked after a while.
Okay, good. It was connecting for a while, so it's good that we are
Yeah, yeah.
here.
Rochelle, I am good. I'm home and away from the traffic because today KFC celebrates 50 years and they're giving away freeness. You
Wow.
know,
I wish
you
I was
know how
home. I'll be
Jamaicans
eating some
are with
KFC.
KFC and them freeness, right? Because apparently they open at 10 or start selling at 10, and there are persons lining up from about 3 a.m., 6 a.m., 8 a.m. this morning. And I hear that some fight broke out at some of the locations. So I'm just glad that I'm not on the road at
Wow.
this time because people serious about them KFC, right?
Jamaica's national dish.
Right? Because I mean, we don't see people joining lines for what's it called, ackee and saltfish.
No, no, no.
No. So KFC. But Rochelle, thank you so much to answer that question. I'm good. For those of you who are just joining us, thank you so much. Hi, Glenn. Thank you so much for joining us in Journal My Journey. Um, for those of you who are just joining, for those of you who don't know my name is Chantal Monroe. I am the CEO and founder of CKM Healing Consultancy. That's where we believe that with a little care, we can help to kindle the mind and body for persons for healing. And with me, I have the awesome legacy maker, Antonio Dawson. We'll be talking about Behind His Silence, Stories Men Don't Tell. It's been a long time coming. God knew that we had to connect for such a time as this in this season because He
Amen.
knows that I am passionate about helping men, not just women, helping men to heal. And so I am so excited for this conversation. So persons are greeting and saying hello. I mean, I remember sharing the flyer and some persons were like, "Oh, I know him from social media." So I'm like, "Yeah, man, he is out there making an impact." And so briefly, Antonio is a Jamaican. He actually used to live in Jamaica. He was a police officer for what, several years before
Hmm.
he left to go to the UK, and now an award-winning psychotherapist who is advocate, who is strongly helping and creating the spaces for men, not just persons, but for Black men to be seen, to be heard, to heal, to know that they are supported. He lives in the UK with his lovely, lovely wife and three children. Two, one is 7 and the others are twins, right? 4-year old.
Yeah. Yeah, four. Yeah.
That is so amazing. Considering my background and my story, that is just
Yeah.
amazing, right? And
Hmm.
so I'm going to open up the floor a little bit for him to share more of his background and how he got here. You know, an award-winning psychotherapist. How did we get here?
Great. Thank you so much again for having me. And it's such a wonderful privilege to be connected to you. I am so passionate about the work you're doing, and I'm so
Thank
delighted to
you.
be a part of the journey that you're on. When we connected and we spoke, it was not just a space for psychological conversation. It was that spiritual connection and a
Mhm.
desire to do great things and to make impact. And I
Yeah,
think it's so important for me to be a part of your journey. So thank you.
thank you too. Thank you.
All right, so just to share a bit about me. So as you mentioned, I grew up in Jamaica, the best parish, Trelawney, and in an area called Carterwood, a small district where we are known for farming. My parents are farmers, and we grew up with a very humble life. As a child, I struggled academically and was often seen as the one that wouldn't amount to much. But
Mhm.
grace caught me
Yeah.
when I was 11 going on to 12, as most of us know in Jamaica, you do the grade 6 achievement tests, and I didn't pass that test. I failed with flying colors.
Which we
And
with flying colors.
flying colors. I
Yeah.
failed so terribly, and I felt a lot of feelings of inferiority. And if I was to think about low mood and feeling quite stressed, that would have been my first encounter of experiencing very low mood. And at that point, I can recall thinking that life would, be unfair and things I would not achieve certain things. But I remember
Mhm.
my sister gave me the book "Gifted Hands" by Ben
Oh, very good
Carson,
book. Very good
and
book.
and at that time, yes, I was struggling to read. I couldn't read at the age of 12.
Yeah.
And I remember trying to read that book. And that book took me a year to learn to read, but I got it in the end.
Wow.
And that book literally changed my life. And from being a student who couldn't perform well, it took me 1 year to become a good reader and then move on to high school. Went to the best high school in Jamaica, Over Technical High School, where I
No
served
comment.
in. Yep. I served in various capacity and also as deputy head boy and served, well, graduated as most outstanding student in academics. And after graduating, I joined the police force, where I spent a few years working in working walking the beat initially in Montego Bay. After walking the beat in Montego Bay, I wanted to get involved in investigation. So I then
Mhm.
transitioned from, well, I walked the beat, then I did patrol. I drove the
Yeah.
service vehicle for a while.
Yeah.
And then it was in the streets that I actually became passionate about psychology. I was
Mm.
first passionate about sociology because I really wanted to understand why society functioned, how it functioned.
Right.
And I did sociology in my A levels. And then I transitioned into policing and I became more curious to understand society's impact on the human mind. And as a result
Mm.
of that,
Powerful.
I
Yeah.
started studying psychology while working as a police officer. It was very
Look at that.
intense.
Wow.
Yes, very
Wow.
intense.
Wow.
And I can recall, um, transitioning from driving the patrol vehicle to then working as an investigator in the fraud squad. And then
Mhm.
after transitioning from the fraud squad, I went to major organized crime. And then I met my wife and we decided, I met my wife in church when I was a teenager, and we
Yeah.
decided to get married. And I came to the UK, not because I wanted to leave Jamaica, not because I wanted an opportunity. I love Jamaica,
Right.
I had a good life. And when we thought about the best process, we thought coming here would have been a better opportunity for children and so forth. I came to the UK, didn't know what God had in store for me. Studying
Mm-hmm.
psychology in Jamaica. When I came here, I work in forensic mental health, working with men with mental health difficulties, but they had severe mental health difficulty, personality disorder. So everything you'd read, textbook, when you
Yeah.
think about borderline, antisocial, all the different kind of personality disorder, I was working with them. And it was at that point that my passion for black men really started developing, because what I recognize in the UK is a disparity, that there's
Mm-hmm.
so much black men who were in these services that were
Mm-hmm.
sectioned and weren't able to really access the care that they need. And I became curious and to wonder why it is that so much black men are
Right.
actually in these services, and why is it that most of the men I'm working with, in a population that we're only 3% of the population, black people are only 3% of the UK's population, and then there's so many of us who are actually represented in mental health services. So I really wanted to do something about it. And I heard
Mhm.
about the pathway to become a therapist. Went back to university, studied psychology at the postgraduate level, and became a therapist. And went back to become a high intensive therapist to work with more complex mental health difficulties. So I
Right.
did two postgraduate studies, and I've been working in psychology since. And that's been my
Wow.
pathway. The work that I've done has led me to be an award-winning therapist, and I've been awarded on a few occasions for the work that I do. So I'm humbled. I'm grateful for what God
Yeah.
has done. It's been a journey that has been defined by just God's grace and just me following the path that He has for me.
Yeah. Yeah. Talk about alignment. Talk about from glory to glory. Talk about transitions and seasons
Hmm.
and just how intentional God is. It's so amazing. Like just yesterday, I was reflecting on my own journey of
Hmm.
how, I'd represent in different spaces, not knowing that it was just a stepping stone to all of
Yes.
this.
Yes.
Um, and if we only knew sometimes God's big plans, right? We
Hmm.
would just
Hmm.
humble ourselves from the beginning, yeah?
Definitely.
But
Definitely.
you said grace, 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 grace. Awesome work indeed. Awesome work indeed. And so I must commend you for sticking to the journey. I can imagine it must not all have been easy at all,
Yeah.
transitioning, then family and children and all the works, and especially being a black man yourself, I can imagine
Mm.
it it's been a journey, you know. As a journal, my journey says, powerful story. Thank you for sharing.
That's
Indeed.
my
And
bro.
so
Great to have you here.
I'm gonna ask a segue question that is so out of left field, but tell me, if you could be any appliance in the home, in the house, what would it be and why?
Any appliance in the home, what would
Yeah,
it be and why?
yeah,
Any appliance,
yeah. Furniture or appliance?
furniture, and appliance. I think I'd love to be. I love cooking. That's something I'd love to. If I should be an appliance in the home, I'll definitely be an oven.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, I'll be an oven, because here's why. When you put things in the oven, it goes through a
Ooh,
process and it
yeah.
comes out as something that can actually change a person's
Come on.
taste, change their life. It can change a lot about them. Not only that, if we think about the oven in the context of baking,
Hmm.
whatever you mix together and put in that
Yeah.
oven, it has this heating capacity that transform regular ingredients into a product that comes together, right? Which means it doesn't matter how much things are segmented, once you put it together and put it in the heated condition, because sometimes you need the heat to literally become your best self. So I would consider
Mm,
myself a
come
oven,
on.
really creating a space for growth. And I'm all about growth mindset and transformation. And I think the
Yeah.
oven does create that space for
Yeah.
development. Because sometimes we're trying to avoid the heat of life, and it's necessary to engage in certain situations that are difficult and heated because you're coming out better on the other
Mhm.
side.
Mhm. Come on, that felt like a whole sermon a while ago, talking about being placed in the oven and withstanding the heat and pressure. You know, we're growing up pressure bust pipe. That's the saying that we always hear. But
Hmm.
in this case, when God's pressure is applied, the pipe that's burst is just powerful and anointed and ready to overflow into the different spaces that He would plant us. And so,
Amen.
thank you so much for that. So
Thank you for
somebody
this
start
answer.
collecting the offering now. And so let us get into it. Why do you think, why do you believe that men struggle to acknowledge or talk about their mental states, especially when it comes to trauma?
There's so many factors that contribute to this. I think a lot of times we really go for what is the norm to say is that men oftentimes really are not emotionally attuned or they don't want to be vulnerable. But for me, I can really share from this from my own experience because I didn't really understand mental health and mental illness until I became a police and I was studying psychology
Mhm.
because we grew up in a society, as I mentioned, I love sociology. Our socialization never really created the space for us to really understand what mental health really is. And we were socialized to understand mental illness as only a person being mad. So
Yeah.
growing up in my community or growing up in Jamaica, we will only see the persons who are walking on the street or really acting crazy as someone with a mental illness. And
Yeah.
even in that time, I don't think most of us have the awareness that it's actually a mental illness. We just say that
Right.
they're mad, but we don't understand the depth of it. But for
Mhm.
me, there are many factors. You have the social conditioning and the things around masculinity. The idea that you have to show up as a man and you have to man up. We train
Yeah.
our boys that they have to be tough and they
Mhm.
can't really
Mhm.
speak
Mhm.
about how they feel. And there's nothing wrong with training your child to be resilient. There's nothing wrong with training a boy to be resilient. But at the same
Mhm.
time, you don't want to cause your child to grow up without emotional intelligence and being emotionally attuned. And
Right.
so that's one of the problem within the culture if you're coming from a Caribbean culture. But how did this culture develop? We have to ask ourselves. You have to think about the socialization did not just become ingrained in the society by itself. You have to think
Mhm.
about things like the plantation system,
Oh, yes.
how slavery shaped the mental script of our
Mhm.
people. We were
Yeah.
socialized to be resilient, and the plantation system. If you talk about weakness, you'll be beaten. If you show emotion, you'll be
You
beaten.
did it,
You'll
yeah.
be punished. And so these things, according to epigenetics, they pass down. They pass
Absolutely.
down into
Absolutely.
the
Mhm.
generation. So what we have societies where black men and men in general are oftentimes socialized to retain and suppress feelings, suppress thoughts. And over
Mhm.
time, anything that is suppressed is going to be something that comes out in a
Absolutely.
different way. And a lot of us as men also fear being judged or being
Mhm.
misunderstood. So sometimes we might hold back our thoughts or feelings because we don't feel safe enough. And
Yeah.
because many of us have never really experienced safety within our very homes, it was
Mhm.
never a safe place to talk about how you feel. So how am I going to tell
Yeah.
someone now, even a
Yeah.
partner or a friend? Actually, I'm having a rubbish day. I'm feeling really bad because there is this underlying belief that you're going to be judged. And so many of us lack the skill to be vulnerable. So we lack the emotional language to share
Mhm.
these things.
Yeah.
And within our
Yeah.
culture, if we're talking about Caribbean, within our culture, you'd actually be seen as maybe a homophobic person in a really
Yeah.
in certain
Yeah.
situation.
Yeah.
If you were to share about homosexual, if you were to share about how you truly feel, it might he's just boy, he's just weak and he's just girly. And so
Mhm.
some
There, I'm not hearing you anymore. I'm not
can you hear
sure.
me now?
Okay, I'm hearing you now. Yes.
Yeah, so the cultural expectation has a lot to do
Mm-hmm.
with men talking about their feeling. And again, men like to have a sense of control.
Yeah.
So the fact that we have to really share those core feelings, it represents a sense of weakness. It takes
Yeah.
away something from us. We don't want people to look down on us because we're socialized to say it takes away from our masculinity
Yeah.
if we were to talk too much about how we're feeling. And
Mm-hmm.
so a lot of us don't want to be a burden to people or show that weakness because we're socialized to just deal with it, to just man up, to just
Right.
be strong.
Yeah.
As I'm fighting right now not to socialize my son the way I was socialized, because naturally what I want to say is just get him to say, yo, just be
Just
a
tough
man,
love.
don't
Yeah.
cry,
Yeah.
because that's how I
Yeah.
was socialized.
Yeah.
So I think if the thing is, many of us are not conscious that we're passing on
That
these
is
things
it.
that we were socialized into.
Yeah.
So it becomes a transgenerational problem if
Yeah.
you're not aware of these things that you were taught or what you were exposed to
Yeah.
support your son or your daughter to not experience the same. So a lot of things, a lot of factors, but there's just some of them, the
Right.
discrimination that comes with speaking about it. Some
Mm-hmm.
persons don't find that they can trust certain people. There's a lot of factors to
Oh yeah.
think about.
Yeah. Yeah. And like you rightfully said, what we do not transfer, or what we do not transform, the correct word, what we don't transform gets transferred from
Hmm.
one generation to the next. And it takes some amount of emotional intelligence or awareness of
Hmm.
self to, as you rightfully said, in even your situation right now, recognize that, oh, this is something that I learned and adopted, and
Hmm.
now I'm trying to raise my child to be different. So I have to now reel back a little bit and be like, okay,
Hmm.
no, this is the way that I'd want to help him to grow up.
Hmm.
I see Glenisha say, and perhaps think they'll lose respect when they become
Yeah,
vulnerable, and that's so
definitely.
true,
Certainly,
you
yeah.
know. But the thing is, the challenge now is to reshape the culture to realize that vulnerability brings healing, brings a
Yeah.
different level of community
Mhm.
and unity that exists.
Mhm.
And that's why I'm so passionate about conversations like these, because one conversation will start the change that's needed. And you and I probably won't even be here when that change happens, but
That's right, but we have to start it. We have to do
at
our part.
least, right? At least we have started. And another thing you said that is so true is that people don't recognize that when you suppress the emotions, it shows up as a medical diagnosis that nobody wants. It
Many
shows up
things.
as filling prescriptions that nobody wants. And
Hmm.
that affects so many other things in your life.
Hmm.
And it's just so much. I see Glenisha says when a man shares, they'll realize how many other men feel the same.
Yeah.
They are truly alone. And that is so true. I shared a video on TikTok the other day talking about the percentage of men who report experiencing at least one traumatic event in their lifestyle and lifetime, and that was 61%. And most of the comments were men, and they were saying a lot without saying a lot.
Wow.
They were saying a lot without saying a lot,
Wow.
right? And it's thank God for change and people like us
Hmm.
that are having the
Hmm.
conversations. And so, with that, let's get into how unhealed trauma in men affect their ability to lead, affect their ability to parent, and be in even relationships, especially in
Hmm.
a Caribbean household.
Yeah. I think there are lots for us to kind of unpack within this question because
Mhm.
the truth is nobody goes to university to be an effective father. You go to university to be a therapist, or you go to university to be different, to get different degrees, but we don't get degrees in parenting. So really what you're
Has
carrying
chipped out. Okay. I think
is
you're
nice.
back. It chipped out a little bit. So, but you're back.
Okay. So
Hmm.
what we're really socialized with is what we have most of the time. And if you're not actively going about and trying to educate yourself on how to be better, then you're only going to be serving from what you have. So, in terms of parenting, what you might find is that if you're socialized with a parenting style that was harsh or more authoritarian, where it was all about rigid discipline, you might
Mhm.
find that as a parent, you might find as a father that you take that style into your home and it disconnects you from developing emotional attachment to your child. You
Mhm.
might find that your child is really scared of you rather than actually feeling that they can talk to you. It shows up in emotionally unavailable parents because you might be a dad that you're not really there to kind of understand what your child is thinking, feeling, behaving because you're living by a set of rules. And the rule is that children must do these things, and this is how children should function because those are some of the rules that you've inherited and you're carrying. And we call that in psychology rules for living. So your rules that you have and the rules that were passed down to you are the rules that you now want to pass down and instill on your children. While your parents might have used that because that's what they had, it might not be what you need to depart or impart on your children. So what
Yeah.
that does is create a cycle of transgenerational trauma. So we
Mhm.
find that things are continuing, these unhelpful patterns of parenting continue throughout the cycle. So you have to actively think about as a father, how am I parenting? Am I parenting from what my standard, what I want, or am I parenting from what my parents instill in me?
Yeah.
It's a
Yeah.
question you gotta
Yeah.
ask yourself.
Yeah.
Is this me parenting or is this a parenting style that I inherited? Because oftentimes the way we're living, we're not living our life from our own goals and dreams and intention. We're often living our life from our parents and our family or people we've met along the way, how they've socialized us to think. So you want to
Mhm.
unpack your thinking to see if it's yours. And then it's important that we think about the fact that are we in a place where we are able to regulate ourselves? Because as
Mhm.
fathers, as in
Yep.
parenting,
Yep.
your child is modeling you.
Absolutely.
So if you are
Absolutely.
not learning how to regulate yourself when difficult moments come, when your child, like just a moment ago before I came on,
Yeah.
my son just spilled his juice everywhere, right? And I really wanted, because I don't like a mess, right? But
Yeah.
I really wanted to get angry, but I just had to realize that he's gonna model me. And
Yeah.
so if I get to that point where I'm so emotional, dysregulated, he's going
Yeah.
to recognize and think that that's an appropriate way to behave when
Mhm.
things doesn't go how you want it to go.
Mhm.
So that's in relation to parenting. You gotta first understand how you were parented, understand how that is now impacting your children. When it
Mhm.
comes to leadership, leadership is another part of it because if as a leader you have not unpacked or healed from your trauma, what you might find is that you are leading from a place where you are trying to be this person that is in control of everything and you're
Yeah.
leading from a fear-based leadership.
Yeah.
And what fear based leadership does is that it's often connected to a style of leadership that a person experienced at a different point in their life. And we
Yeah.
can agree that growing up in Jamaica, a lot of us grew up with fear based leadership.
Oh
If you
yes.
don't do this, that is going to happen. If
Yep.
if you don't do
Yep.
this, we're going to do
Yep.
that. So
Yep.
we
Yep.
grew up with this fear based leadership, and
Mhm.
what that kind of traumatic experience does, it manifests in as in a leader being more of a micromanager. You don't really give people autonomy to develop, to learn, to unlearn. You want to control everything. You want to ensure that everything is a set way and it's
Yeah.
done in your time. And so what you find is that you don't create an environment where leaders are growing
Yeah.
because most time leaders are actually fearful of you, that they're terrified of making
Yeah.
mistake, that they become anxious, that they may become depressed, and so you're
Mhm.
creating a cycle of a fearful environment. And
Yeah.
what this does, it when a leader is operating from a trauma and they're not healed, it then create a reactive or a system where decision making is broken down. Because
Mhm.
oftentimes when you're that kind of leader, people
Mhm.
are not going to share things with you.
Oh no.
you're
Mm-mm.
you're not going to get the people on your team because people are
Yeah.
going to be so fearful of sharing with you that they might avoid giving you inside information.
Yeah.
And it's important that as a leader you can hear what is happening in your team,
Mhm.
because when you don't heal from your trauma, again, you might find yourself in a place where you don't have empathy.
No. Or you can't
you
relate
you
at all.
there's no empathy. You can't relate to someone's struggle. You can't understand where they're coming from, because if
Yeah.
you haven't healed, it oftentimes take away from your ability to empathize with someone who is hurting, to
Yeah.
someone who is having a difficult time.
Yep.
And so, if you are a leader in whatever capacity you're in, maybe you're not in a management kind of leadership style, but you have to be attuned with yourself to be able to tune into others.
Exactly.
And if you are bleeding, there's no way you can actually really heal someone.
Hmm.
Many people who are coming into are going to be exposed to your leadership. They're coming to learn. They're coming to with a whole space that
Yeah.
needs to be filled. And if you are in a place that you're so overwhelmed by your past trauma, and sometimes some of these traumas are not conscious to you.
Hmm. That 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 is it. That is it. Especially with men who in Jamaica they say, "Man, hold up my stress," not realizing the impact of that. When you hold it up, it expels itself in other ways. And in this
Mm-hmm.
case, for persons who are just joining, we're talking about how unhealed trauma in men show up in different spaces, such as leadership, such as parenting, and ultimately in relationships.
Mm-hmm.
People don't realize that, listen, you can be so full of unhealed wounds, thinking you're doing the best, you are showing up the best, and not realizing that you are creating a space of toxic stress that will repel, continue. And
Yes.
epigenetics is such a thing that where your genes is able to adapt to that atmosphere, especially
Mm-hmm.
being in there for so long, and it
Mm-hmm.
continues and the cycle continues.
Mm-hmm.
What today, by grace of God, by this
Amen.
conversation, we're breaking that cycle. And so, with regards to how unhealed trauma show up in relationships with men, I mean, I've had experiences where some men refuse to have children, refuse to get married because they saw what was in their dad and they refuse
Yes.
to pass that down. And that's
Yes.
another kind of trauma response because they're now
Yes.
saying to themselves, I cannot heal enough to be better for somebody else that I would like to bring into this
Mm-hmm.
world.
Mm-hmm.
And so they refuse to start that process of healing, thinking
Mm-hmm.
that if I don't have a child, this can't get passed down. But for every encounter that you have, for every way that you show up, relationships and all, you're passing on the same thing that you
Mm-hmm.
refuse to
Mm-hmm.
heal. You know, what has been your experience like with Black men and relationships on healed trauma?
I think before I kind of share my experience, just on the back of what you're saying, I think it's very important for men to recognize that if you had a parent who passed on certain traumatic, who you saw experience certain traumatic life, or you've seen really horrible things growing up, you can actively make the decision to transfer post-traumatic growth. You understand me? There's post traumatic trauma, there's also post traumatic growth. And I'm a victim of post traumatic growth. I
Mhm.
know what it is to say, you know what, this is what I saw,
Yeah,
and this is what I'm going to be.
yeah,
I saw abuse, and I'm going to be the protector. I'm going to be the
yeah,
carer. I'm going to be the person
yeah,
that creates a home that is healthy.
yeah,
So you can actually, with the right support, with the right nurturing, with the
mhm,
willingness to learn, you can actually create meaningful relationship and build a wonderful family. For those who
yeah,
might be saying they're not going to engage in commitment because of what they've been exposed to. But
yeah,
in relation to how trauma show up in relationship for men who have not really gone through a process of treatment or healing, it comes up in different way. We might find that in your relationship there's difficulty with communication or intimacy or
yeah,
real solid emotional connection, because a
yeah.
lot of women are seeking men who they can be emotionally connected
And the
to,
picture,
and if
mhm.
and having good meaningful conversations.
Yeah,
Men who are traumatized become really internally focused, and their attention is often on how they feel and what they've been through, because they're
yeah,
terrified of
yeah,
how they're going to be treated or how they're going to come
yeah,
across. And so
yeah,
what you might find is that you might find men showing up in relationship showing a front stage as if they are really strong and really a masculine aura, but within they're intimidated and insecure. You might find that this is show up in the form of anger, irritability, or emotional
Yeah.
outbursts,
Mhm.
consistently showing up in ways that you emotionally disconnected or withdraw from certain situation. You might find yourself in a relationship women with a man who's easily jealous or wants to control the narrative, wants to control you. And sometimes you might find that you've been gaslit, or you might find that they might want to control you in certain ways because they haven't really dealt with themselves, and they might feel like sometimes some of these men are doing things that are wrong.
Yeah.
They know that they're acting in the wrong way outside the relationship, and they're terrified of you doing it. And
Yeah.
sometimes it's a trauma that is actually causing them to do certain things, because the healing that they need is not going to be sometime within that relationship. And they might be trying to find the healing somewhere else. So infidelity might become a problem in your relationship.
Mhm.
And it's a
Mhm.
common problem in Jamaica. Persons are moving around from person to person,
Yeah.
trying to find healing when
Yeah.
actually the healing is not in that next relationship. It's not in that next pleasure,
Mhm.
because persons who haven't processed trauma use different means of what we call safety behaviors. You
Yeah.
might find that they turn to drugs or alcohol, or they want to have multiple relationships. These are
Mhm.
soothing things that they're seeking, but they haven't gotten to the root of the problem.
Really cut
And they might
there.
say, I don't really know why I'm doing this. But with further exploration, you can understand that there is something there. Some persons might be in a
Yeah.
relationship for 10 years with a person that you think should make that commitment by now to marry you.
Yep.
And they just have you in a cycle,
Yep.
causing you now to start feeling like you're not worthy. What is
Yeah.
wrong with me? Why is it
Mhm.
that he's not marrying me? And you start to
Mhm.
become, your self-esteem is now being attacked, but that man hasn't dealt with his trauma. And so it starts to impact you within that relationship,
Yeah.
and you start to struggle with your own sense of worth. So
Mhm.
so there are many ways that if a man goes into a relationship, or a woman goes into a relationship without actually dealing with the traumatic experiences they're
Yeah.
doing, it's going to manifest in different way, whether that is biologically, physically, emotionally, or socially. It's going to be impacting that relationship and create disconnect and breakdown in
Yeah.
communication.
Yeah.
So the
Yeah.
main thing that happens within this relationship is that it lacks commitment, it lacks communication, and it lacks comprehension.
Yeah.
Because the person, you just feel like this person don't understand me, they
Yeah.
don't get me,
Yeah.
and the things that are always going wrong and problems are not resolved because the person haven't dealt with the problem within themselves.
Yeah, and this is so powerful of a conversation. And for persons who are on here, go ahead and share this live with others because this is so potent. And of course, for persons who might not have been able to join, we're gonna save it. But as we go deeper, you said some things that I like, even in the space that I'm in, I see it so much, especially in the context of marriages where people you get to a spot where if the two does not have a growth mindset, when
Hmm.
the mirror of what you refuse to heal from back then puts up in front of the other person, there's a disconnect in the marriage, and so there's now a breakdown because trauma is showing up and they don't recognize that it is trauma. One person might
Yeah.
say, "This is just how I
Yeah.
am," and the next person is like, "We can't stand him or her because
Hmm.
not recognize it that these are unhealed patterns, unhealed trauma that needs to be
Hmm.
addressed individually and collectively to proceed further into a marriage. And unfortunately, some people take it as this is how it is. I'm going to have to learn that this is just how it is. And they start to readjust to the dysfunction as opposed to try to renew, correct, and pave a new pathway.
Hmm.
You had touched on some of the common signs of unresolved trauma in the men that we often go unrecognized. Is there any other silent ones that we don't see but could be as a result of unhealed trauma?
Yeah, I think in terms of general traumatic experience, because we all have traumatic experience. If we're talking about traumatic experience that persons are not attached, really are disconnected from, it might show up in the sense that they're emotionally numb, or
Mm.
detached oftentimes, difficulty feeling or expressing emotions. They might seem a bit cold and distant, and sometimes you feel like they're not really interested. It's sometimes not them. Sometimes it's a traumatic experience that they've gone through that I've disconnected from, and that's where it's important that persons
Yeah,
aren't in tune with what they've been through, because sometimes it's not you. And you
yeah,
want to be able to label that this is not how I want to treat you. This is not how I want you to feel. But I've been
yeah,
through this situation, and sometimes I operate or behave in ways that I don't want to. And so
yeah,
when you have insight into what you're going through, you can start to distinguish what is actually you and what is actually trauma. So you
yeah,
might find a relationship that, persons who've gone through trauma, there might be a big issue around trust, because the person don't really feel like they know you. And sometimes you might not be doing anything wrong, but because you don't have the skills to create really safe
yeah.
environment, because you're
Mhm,
oftentimes in that fight or flight response, you're always, in a state
mhm,
that you are experiencing your own difficulties,
mhm,
that is then taken on into relationship, causing things like mood swings. You might
mhm,
find that the person, 1 minute they're hot, 1 minute they're cold, today they like you, tomorrow they're
mhm.
not there. And
Yeah,
so what you find is there's a lot of up and down kind of roller coaster experience in your
mhm,
relationship. It might cause avoidance in behavior.
yeah,
Person might not be as committed to the relationship at certain times.
yeah,
Might cause persons to become addicted to substance within the relationship, and they might want you to get involved in it. So some person can get addicted not only to substance, they can addicted to things like certain kind of sexual behavior, because that suits them, and it might not be in line with your morals and your value, and you find yourself doing things that you don't want to do. So a
yeah.
lot of things happen
Right,
within the
right.
context of trauma.
Right. Let me not get started with how when we do not heal these things, these doors, and when we don't close them, it's so easy for the enemy to come in and cause strongholds that
Mm-hmm.
show up as soul ties, as curses. And
Mm-hmm.
that's a whole other
Mm-hmm.
that's a whole other deliverance right there, which I don't
Mm-hmm.
think this conversation is even have the space to go into that, because people don't realize that there's such a thin line with experiencing pain and activation of certain spiritual things that
Mm-hmm.
happen that keeps you not just unhealed but now bound and stuck.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it's so important that we begin, especially as men, begin to recognize these things and heal, because it's not just now your physical and emotional and psychological health, but it's also your spiritual health.
Yeah.
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 And earlier we spoke about leading, how, unhealed trauma in men affect how they lead. It's now impacting the call that God has on men's life to lead, because
Yeah.
where there's unhealed trauma, where there's pain, it affects now how you see God as Father over your life, to
Mm-hmm.
then be committed to a relationship and guiding that as the lead and head of the household. And
Mm-hmm.
that's a whole other conversation, which we
Yeah.
probably should come back to and talk about,
But I
right?
also think it's
Mhm.
important that we kind of spend a bit of time to distinguish between having a traumatic experience and actually being someone who is actually having symptoms of post-traumatic stress
Uh,
disorder. It's
yes, that's
different,
going to be
because
my question.
anyone
Yeah.
can have a traumatic experience, but there are many men who are actually living with PTSD, and they are found, especially when I think about the Jamaican context, and it's something I think about a lot since I've studied psychology and came to the UK, just how traumatized our society is,
Mhm.
because of all the nature of crime and all the things that we see in the media and everything that
Yeah.
happened. We have a lot of trauma that is actually covered up.
Oh,
And so what
absolutely.
you might find lots of people having real symptoms of trauma, PTSD symptoms like flashbacks, nightmares,
Mhm.
intrusive thoughts. They might
Mhm.
have quite intense emotional outbursts, and they might be really in a really dysregulated way, but it might not be something that shows up on the surface every day. But when they're left with themselves at night
Absolutely.
times, they might be there. A lot of men are crying in silence. A
Yeah.
lot of men are really traumatized in silence. They wake up in the morning, they look strong, they put on the strong face, But nighttime, they're reminded of the time when they were abused, when they were shot at, when they had to run. These things
Yep.
don't just go, even though it's so normalized in our society. It has real implication on our psyche, and so you might find that a lot of men are going through real complex trauma
Mm-hmm.
because it happens over and over again. Those are some of the things I treat a lot when it comes to black men,
Yeah.
complex trauma that black men goes through, and supporting them to unpack and heal from those
Right.
experiences.
Right. I want to add a little bit more context to also what you've said. To one of the things that I often find is that people, when we talk about trauma, people think that, oh, it's just the big things, it's the big kabooms. But you've said some things a while ago, like repeated. So trauma is as a result of the experience you've gone through, the traumatic experience. Trauma is what stays inside your body and affects your ability to function under normal circumstances, right? And it can be little things. And you said it a while ago, that neglect, that abuse. It could be physical abuse, not physical, but emotional abuse. Those silent things or little T's that results in trauma or men's ability to or inability to cope, that
Mhm.
silently goes unnoticed. That's Rachel, so the body keeps the effects unknowingly. Exactly.
There's a
And
book. There's
so
a book called The Body Keep the
body
Scores.
keeps
You
the
can read
story,
that.
yes.
Yeah,
Which is a very good, very, very good book
very good
too,
book.
you know. And with that, we've spoken about post-traumatic growth because a lot of times people don't recognize that healing is possible. The brain can rewire itself. Your body can adjust or readjust. What are some basic things that men can do, utilize to start their healing journey?
I think it's first. I think what is needed in our society is really making space for mental health to become an everyday conversation,
Yeah,
making space for men to feel okay to talk about how they're feeling and what they're going through.
yeah,
And that's something I tend to do with the men that come around me, is creating that safe space to have conversation about it. And then over time, men might feel more open
yeah.
to go into addressing deeper difficulties that they're experiencing.
Mhm.
But in terms of things that men can do, I think it's really thinking about things like building community, connecting with faith, if that's something that is important to you.
Yeah,
It's really understanding the importance of expressing how you're truly feeling. And not only that, becoming aware of emotions, because oftentimes we're not able to label our emotion.
yeah,
So
yeah,
when I was growing up and even before I left Jamaica, the only thing I would say, and our culture would just say we feel good or we feel bad. I
yeah.
just feel
There's
weird.
no,
We feel
yeah,
good, we feel bad. Nobody really expressed, actually, I'm feeling angry today. I'm feeling irritated. I'm feeling
yeah.
annoyed. I'm feeling frustrated. I'm
Expression.
feeling upset.
Mhm.
You really want to be able to label how you're feeling. And
Yeah,
that's important for you to start learning how to care for yourself, right?
yeah,
And making space for first becoming attuned with your needs. There's something, there's a theory that speak about the inner child, right? And the inner child work is important. So I might need to recognize that even though you're a man, there's a child in you that is going to be acting out. There's
yeah,
a child in you that is going to be doing things that you don't really want to do. That's
mhm,
because you need to be giving yourself the care. As men, starting from a place also of compassion,
yeah,
we are socialized to be rigid and hard on ourselves. And so we just shake it off and feel like we
yeah.
just
And
have to be
keep
tough.
going.
Giving
Mhm.
yourself the compassion to know that if you're really feeling unwell, it's okay to take a day from work. It's okay
Come
to just
on.
do something, go
Yes,
somewhere, take that time off, really make that space to just really just unwind from the stresses that you're carrying, and make time for your own self-care. Make time
yeah,
for the people that matters to you. Sometimes what you really need for your healing is to connect with people that are important to you.
yeah, yeah,
Really spending time with your family, taking time with spending time with your children. You'll be amazed to see how powerful it is when you really connect with the people who are connected to you, doing the
mhm,
things that you enjoy doing. Whether that is, I like fishing,
yeah,
like riding my bike. I make time for those things, fitness,
yeah,
those things that are important to you. And,
mhm,
and ultimately, if you're finding that you're consistently stuck in a cycle of having mood swings and things are feeling quite low, you want to
yeah,
be able to get to the point of seeking professional help.
yeah,
seeking a therapist, or reaching out to someone who might be able to direct you to resources or to people that can support you.
Yeah.
But I would say what we normally do in therapy is to start with what we call a three-legged stool analogy, and that is to look at your routine, necessary, and pleasurable things. What's in your routine right now? Because a lot of people are consistently just focusing on their routine. If you imagine a three-legged stool,
Yeah.
right? If you take off one leg, what happens?
Can't stand up.
It falls over. So if all you're doing is your routine and you're not doing necessary things like really taking care of yourself, or really, preparing your meals or eating right, then that's a problem. And then
Hmm.
pleasurable things. What are the pleasurable things in your life?
That's
And
so good.
if you stop doing pleasurable things, oftentimes you're just going to be connected to your routine, and that's going to burn you out, and you're going to be connected more to your trauma, and you're stuck in a cycle of defeat. So
Yeah.
really starting to look at how these early experiences
Hmm.
really impacted you, and then think of building systems like your routine and so forth, general things that can
Hmm.
help you. And then learning a simple step that I call the ABC.
Yes.
You really acknowledge that the thoughts that are coming to your mind. Don't believe
Hmm.
that because you went through something and it affected you, that you have to stay in that place. Because what happened with trauma
Yeah.
is oftentimes you're trapped in rumination. You're going over and over and over. And then C, you want to challenge your thinking, asking
Yeah.
yourself, what's another way to see this? What's
Yeah.
another way to
Yeah.
look at this situation? Because in therapy, what would ultimately support a person who's been traumatized to do is to start updating their way of seeing it. And we
Yeah.
take them through the process of reliving the trauma, but then helping them to update it. That was then, this is now. Then I
Yeah.
was a child. Now I'm an adult. Then I was defeated. I couldn't help myself. Now I can take care of myself. So
Yeah.
supporting yourself with how you can nurture yourself now, how you can add value to yourself now, is going to be what's going to be essential to support you to break that trap that comes with being traumatized by different experiences.
Right, right. I love your analogy with the stool. And so one of the leg represents routine, the other one represents
Necessary tasks that you have to do,
necessary
whether that
task.
is to do assignments, whether that is to pay bills,
Mhm.
whether that is to connect with things that are
Right,
important. But necessary things,
right.
if they're not done, there are consequences. So when
Okay.
you're feeling traumatized or you're low, you might throw certain things out the window. Like you might not want to pay your bills, you might not want to
Mhm.
do important things. The important
Mhm.
things need to be done still. And then
Right.
pleasurable things
That's
goes through the
everything.
window when you become traumatized. You might not want
Right.
to connect with any friends. So the first thing we would support you to do in therapy, if a
Mhm.
person has gone through trauma, is a process called reclaiming your life.
Uh-huh.
So the reclaiming your life process is actually where you're supporting the person to reconnect with life before the trauma.
Mhm.
What was life like before the trauma, and how can we now
Mhm.
connect you with doing some of the things you were doing that you enjoyed before the
Right,
traumatic
right,
experiences?
right.
For some people, they might not have any frame of mind what life was before the trauma because they were traumatized as children.
And
But what we
that's
can
it.
then support you
Mhm.
to do is to build the life that you need. I
Mhm.
can't rebuild because everything I've been exposed to this point was really
Cool, cool.
traumatizing. But I
Mhm.
can now build the life I want. So you support yourself to think about the
Mhm.
ideal life you'd want for yourself, and then start to build that life and operating with
Mhm.
it. And so essential what we support you to do is to follow through with a plan and not your mood. So this
Right,
is my plan. I might feel like I don't want to talk to people. When you think
right.
about trauma, you might want to disconnect from people. I don't want to talk to people, but I'm actively going to engage with my friends. I don't want to
Yeah,
text anyone, but I'm still going to text my friends. I
yeah.
don't want to go anywhere, but I'm still going to go. So you're really pushing yourself beyond just your feelings, because when you're traumatized, you're getting pulled in a lot into what we call emotional reasoning.
So, yeah,
And emotional reasoning is I feel so it is. I feel like I just can't be bothered, so that's how I should live my life.
yeah,
So
yeah.
oftentimes what we're supporting you to do is to go beyond the emotional reasoning.
Right, right, right. And not everything that you feel is true or real. Not everything that you think is to be believed. Yes.
Hmm.
And so sometimes you have to pull outside of that routine to share or experience different things, different
Yeah.
perspectives, right? And that's why
Yes.
it's important to get help, because sometimes when you're going through a traumatic experience or reliving that experience, you are stuck, and it takes somebody else who is not in that scenario with you to pull you out of it. And this is
Hmm.
why men who are online will be watching. It's important not to hold up the stress.
Yeah, man.
Let it out.
It's important you drop the stress here. I mean,
Yes, man.
if you think about you mentioned pressure burst pipe. Anything force is adding to, it's ultimately gonna find somewhere
Momentum.
to come out.
Yep. Yep.
And so you have to think about how much you're holding. Because one thing we do in managing stress, we use that is called a stress bucket. And we
Yeah.
show our clients that when you have so much things flowing into your life, if there's no
Yeah.
outlet to let the stress out, it's going to start overflow, not just in your life, but in the life of others.
Of
So
others
you have to
around.
find healthy ways to start get the stress out.
Yeah, yeah, that's such a perfect analogy. You're dropping so many gems. Like, I should have had something to to write, but it's a good thing we're gonna have this on save. And so as we wind down and as we wrap up, for persons who are on here who are partners, um, what's one thing that they could do to support that partner right now
Mhm.
that you
Well, I think every man as even though they might not say it, is looking for a safe haven. Even if they act as if they don't want it, they do.
mm,
And so you have to think about how do you create a safe space for that man to really share what they are going through. One of the things that we'll say is name it to tame it. You want to
uh,
support that man to create a space that they can name what they're feeling and what they're going through.
mhm,
If you have a partner who has been stuck in the cycle of really feeling low and feeling stressed and feeling angry, you might just want to create a space outside of their anger and frustration to really take them somewhere and check in with them.
yeah,
Plan the best date or the best dinner
yeah,
and just really say, you know what? I really want to spend some time with you and then talk about, this has been concerning me. And I really want to think about how we can navigate through this. How can I support you through this?
mhm,
Create a space for it to be a neutral, a easy conversation to have.
yeah,
Because
yeah,
sometimes, one at a time, what women tend to do is they tend to really communicate to men out of anger or frustration. When that thing is boiling up, you just burst it out and
yeah.
you should be doing. When you use words such as should and must to men, it states that you're being critical.
Mhm,
You should be
mhm,
doing this, you must be doing that. It evokes a critical self. And
mhm.
so what men tend to do, they don't respond to that.
Yeah,
So you want to create space that men feel your care rather than
yeah,
think that you're being critical or judgmental of
yeah,
them.
yeah, yeah.
And so once you start to nurture that more calm environment, and some men might not respond to you, you need to think about how do you get them to respond. Maybe you
That's
need to
fine.
speak to their friends who they will speak to,
Yeah,
and really tell, create a space that help them to feel like actually you're checking on Jack, for example. you
yeah.
know I had a young lady came to me that they went to a church, and her husband is going through a difficult time,
Hmm.
and I know she's trying her best, but
Hmm.
she came to me and she said, "Can you just check in on my husband, please?"
Wow. Yeah,
And I
yeah.
really appreciate. She didn't tell me the context of what he's going through.
Right, right, right,
She's leaving it to him to tell me. But
right.
what she's doing, she's recognized that maybe I don't have all the skills.
Yeah,
Maybe I can't do everything to support him,
yeah.
but there is someone that can.
Hmm.
And so she asked me too. And then I
Right.
was able to kind of create that space to check in on this person and listen to what they're going through. So as
Yeah,
a woman, you can do these things. So listen without kind of judging and creating space where you're just going to be acting out of your emotion.
yeah,
Find ways to affirm that man in your life. You might
yeah,
be going through the worst experience, but remind him that it means a lot to you. Send him
yeah,
that text in the day. Tell them that actually pick up on the things that are positive. Pick up on the things that they're doing well. I
yeah,
really admire when you did this today, or
yeah,
when you made that breakfast yesterday. Thank you
Mhm.
for caring. Creating space that where you're looking out for the positive outcome more than just picking up on the negative.
Yeah,
And when you start to foster that, the man will start to realize that this person really, really wants to connect with me on a deeper level. They might not even recognize that it's an emotional level, but then
yeah,
it pulls them in and it gives them a space to want to open up.
yeah.
Yeah. So use gentle observation, like, if you're talking about things, I've noticed you've been a bit quiet lately.
Right,
Is
right.
everything okay? Don't say, what happened with your lad? God,
Okay, yes,
you can't
yes,
just,
yes,
Jesus
yes.
Christ, man. You, you just depressed.
You
No, you
can't
want to
just, yeah,
use language that they're going to be feeling like, actually, this person notice I'm going through something
yeah,
and then really want to support me. And again,
yeah,
every man, no matter who they are, we deserve respect.
yeah, yeah.
A respect is love for man. Yeah, men want to feel respect. And
Mhm.
so despite they might be going through a difficult low moment, they might not be able to pay the bills like they used to. They're not
Mhm.
providing like they used to. Things have been, not how they want to. Really give that
Yeah.
respect, show that love,
Mhm.
and let them know that there's no need to worry if things are difficult right now. I'm here for
Things
you,
will
baby.
change.
I
Yeah,
got you,
yeah,
sweetie. And men respond to those things. And most
yeah,
importantly,
yeah.
you don't have all the skills. Seek professional support for them, guide them to a therapist, reach out to
Mhm.
Speak Black Man, connect with me,
Hey,
get them to get the therapy that they need. We're here to support them, and
yeah.
you don't have to do it alone.
Yeah, yeah, and that's so powerful. But most importantly, in all of what you've just said, is remember that men are human beings too, with
Yeah.
emotions. They are human beings with emotions, just like you know. And as we wrap up, what's one thing you wish every Caribbean man knew about healing?
I think healing is possible. Healing is it comes about for different person in different ways. But healing is something you need to be open to. But to be open to heal, you gotta first recognize that you're hurting. Or you gotta first recognize that you've been hurt, you've been scarred, you've been affected by certain life experience, whether you're saying it or not. You might have daddy wounds, you might have mommy wounds, but you can support yourself to heal by starting to first acknowledge that there's certain things in my life that just don't make sense. There's
Yeah,
certain patterns that just don't make sense.
and
There's
behavior.
certain habits that just
Mhm.
don't make sense. There's certain lifestyle that I'm trying to break that just don't make sense. And it
Yeah,
comes to a time that I have to be true to myself. I
yeah,
got to recognize that I need help. And if you've tried, Bible says, it's a song, it said, if you try everything and everything failed, try Jesus. But
yeah,
Jesus will show up in that person that is consistently asking you if you're okay.
yeah,
Jesus will show up in that person that is really telling you that there's help available. Jesus
yeah.
will show up on this live to tell you, listen, if things are not going great, you need to get some help. So healing comes in different ways. But first, recognize that you're hurting or you have been hurt and take the stance to take care of yourself. It's not too late to get help. It's not too late to seek a therapist. It's not too late to come to this healing space. It's not too late to get the help. You're losing nothing, you're only gaining. Weakness is not being vulnerable. Weakness is you recognizing that there's something wrong and not working on
Do
it.
something. Yeah, 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 yeah. Powerful, 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 powerful discussion that we could have all day if we could have, right? And so thank you so, so much, Antonio, for opening up this space, for committing your life to making a change, for being that example to show that it doesn't matter how it all started. What matters is what you have now and what you are willing
Mhm,
to do about it to make a change, not just for yourself, but for those around you.
mhm.
Behind his silence, stories men don't tell. Thank you so much again for
Thank you for having me.
accommodating this conversation. I feel like we should have more conversation on different topics, right?
Well, I'm here, and if I have the capacity, I'll always be
Yeah,
willing to share. And it's
yeah,
always a privilege for me, as I mentioned to you behind the scenes. Um, I really want to be able to use the knowledge I have to impact people back home. As
Yeah.
much as I'm in the UK, I'm always thinking, how can I use this to bless Jamaica?
Yeah.
And how can I one day take this back to Jamaica to help create change? So when I
Yeah.
see people like you doing what you're doing, everything I know I want you to have, because
Yeah.
if you know it, then you are underground, you can make change, and then you're going to teach other people, and then
Absolutely.
ultimately we all win. I think a lot of us are sometimes selfish with knowledge, and
Yeah.
it prevents that growth process and that change. And
Mhm.
so what we need to do is to think about how can we use what we have to
To help.
bless. Jesus turned that bread and what? He break it and it
And it
multiplied,
multiplied,
right? So
multiplied.
breaking something from you and giving it to someone else only multiplies it.
Absolutely. And I think
So
that's one of the biggest blessing and treasure that you could have to give it, you know. And as you mentioned, giving back to Jamaica, we're in the process of planning a men's conference. I'm praying to God that we're able to do it in November, the latter part of the year, which would start the journey of creating safe spaces for men on
mhm.
an annual basis. So it's not just a one-off thing, but an every year thing where men have something to look forward to. And change must come. The time has
It's
come.
gonna be
And so
amazing.
it's
As you said that, what I'm thinking about, because I do my annual conference here, and I'm celebrating the 5th year this year for Black Men,
nice.
Speak Black Men.
Congratulations.
It'll be lovely. We're gonna collaborate in the future. We're taking it to Jamaica, so
Yes, yes.
keep
So,
planning. We'll,
so
we'll, we'll be in
my
touch.
mind is going off, and so I'm excited. I can't wait to see what happens next. The
Definitely.
doors God will open to create these spaces because men need it, and there are people who are willing, both men and women, to support these spaces
Hmm.
for men because I think people are just tired, especially in the Jamaican context. People are just
Yeah,
so tired of seeing
of
men
course.
fall
Yeah,
through the cracks and not
yeah.
living up to their full, you know,
Potential. Yeah,
powerful potential as God created them. And so I'm super
yeah.
excited. For those of you who came on and were able to stay with us to the very end, thank you so much for your time. We love to have you on. I'm going to save this live so it can be shared. And
Hmm.
so you can have the opportunity to share it with persons who might not have seen it, to share it with a man who you know would value from this type of conversation, to let them know that they're seen, they're heard, and change is happening. And so thank you so much for joining again. Thank you so much, Antonio, for creating this space and making the time. Bless up yourself, bless up your family, and
Thank you for
we'll
having
talk
me.
again soon. Thank you.
Take care. Take care. Bye bye. Bye bye.
Bye everyone. Take care.